how dangerous is this station for our national security, sir? I'm asking you, Assistant Secretary. How are you as concerned as we are? Yes or no?
I will say two things, ma'am. One, we are concerned with China's efforts around the world to increase its military presence, number one. And
But I'm talking about this
number two,
space station in particular.
I would have to consult with my colleagues across the interagency and get back to you, and perhaps it would
You
be
don't know
more
anything
appropriate-
about this?
Perhaps it would be more appropriate in a classified
But I'm
session.
asking you, do you know about this deep space station in the Patagonia?
I am not an expert
You are
on this
not. So
situation.
you didn't know this happened.
I am not an expert on the issue
400
that you
football
raised.
fields in the middle of Patagonia. I mean, isn't that concerning? Does this have anything to do with the Chinese balloon that was flying over our territory?
Again, I'll say, ma'am, that we are aware of a number of steps that China's taken around the world to
I'm
increase its
talking about
military
Latin America, and
presence.
I'm talking about this.
Understood.
You don't. You don't know about this. Interesting. Okay, so who does?
Ma'am, as I said, I'd be delighted to consult with my colleagues in the interagency and get back to you, and perhaps it would be most appropriate to do so in a classified session, but I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, so interesting. Right, so now let me ask you something else. Do you also know that Cristina Fernandez, the actual vice president, wants to buy 18 Chinese JF-17 fighter jets? They want to buy them from the Chinese. Are you aware of that? And then not only that, to build a fighter jet factory in Buenos Aires and sell those fighter jets to other neighbors, meaning Paraguay, Uruguay, Chile, Bolivia. Are you aware of that?
Ma'am, again, I'm not an expert on either of those questions, and I'd be happy to take that back and come back to you.
Okay. So we certainly hope that either you or one of your colleagues can come back to this forum and explain to us.
Look forward to that.
I
Thank
would
you.
imagine that it's pretty concerning. So since we cannot get any answers from you, then I was going to use this forum to send a message to the Argentinians, specifically to the vice president, and I'm going to do it in Spanish, because maybe they are not hearing from you, but maybe they'll hear it from me, and I'm going to warn them that if they decide to build a fighter jet factory of Chinese fighter jets, it's a very bad idea for them. And moving forward, and everything that has to do with the relationship with the United States. So that's why I'm going to say it in Spanish, and I beg your pardon if you do not understand. Lo voy a decir en español para que quede muy bien claro a mis amigos argentinos. Su presidenta y su presidente está haciendo un pacto con el diablo, que puede tener consecuencias de proporciones bíblicas. Los Estados Unidos no se va a quedar con los brazos cruzados, porque no se puede tener un aliado que fabrique y exporte aviones militares chinos y que se los venda a los vecinos. Hay dos mundos, el mundo libre y el mundo de los esclavos. Espero que los argentinos se queden en el mundo libre. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Salazar, and I will be requesting a classified briefing on this very issue.
Thank you.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Dean.
Well, it's Madeline.
I'm sorry, Madam Dean. What am I saying? Excuse me.
Thank you.
Apologies.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman McCall, Ranking Member Meeks, to all of our witnesses for testifying. I hope you know that some of our absences in this room reflects not at all on the subject matter and your work, but I'm in a markup in another committee at the same time. So with the limited time that I have, I'd like to examine and understand China's role in illicit fentanyl and what the United States is doing about it. We all know that fentanyl is wreaking havoc on our nation, on our communities. In the year ending September of 22, CDC estimates that synthetic opioids, mainly fentanyl, were responsible for about 73,000 overdose deaths, 70% of all drug overdose deaths, which topped 108,000 in a single year. Those numbers are staggering. That's 300 people a day dying of overdose. Some of you may know this is an issue personal for me. I have a son in recovery, long-term recovery from opioid addiction, now for over a decade. By the grace of God, he's in that space. But we know too many of our children and adults are not, and we are losing them China was the primary source of illegal fentanyl entering the United States until the PRC imposed controls in 2019. Today, Mexican drug cartels rely on PRC-sourced precursor chemicals to produce fentanyl. While cooperation between the United States and PRC has yielded some success in curbing illegal fentanyl, recent tensions have hindered that progress. Undersecretary Estevez, Assistant Secretary Crittenbrink, how is the Biden administration working to pressure the PRC to impose further controls on fentanyl precursors? And what is the administration doing? What progress is being made to pressure the PRC to combat financial flows from illicit fentanyl? Mr. Estevez, either one, yes.
Ma'am, thank you very much for your question. And certainly, we recognize the tragedy and the travesty caused by these opioids, synthetic opioids, and certainly fentanyl. I think you've described it very well, ma'am. China did take steps in 2019 to control fentanyl, which brought direct shipments of fentanyl down to almost zero. Now the problem, ma'am, has transformed into precursor chemicals that are coming out of China, are being diverted elsewhere and then manufactured into fentanyl and synthetic opiates and brought into the United States. I would say we've done two things. One, in our engagement, direct engagement with the PRC, we have made cracking down on this precursor fentanyl problem one of our absolute highest priorities. We've told the Chinese they need to take a number of steps to make sure that they and their entities know to whom they are selling these precursors, to try to prevent their diversion, to make sure that they're properly labeled and the like. And I will say, candidly speaking, ma'am, our conversations have not been very satisfactory on that for a variety of issues, partly related to the broader bilateral relationship, partly related to some of the concerns that the Chinese have, which we think are unfounded. But I can assure you, this is an absolute top priority in our engagement with China. The second major thing that we're trying to do is work with other countries in the world to together put pressure on China to take the right steps. We're not the only country that suffers from this scourge. Certainly in North America, others do, but this has increasingly been becoming a global problem. Thank you.
And if I could.
Yes, please.
Unfortunately, there's no exports going to the fentanyl precursor manufacturer in China. However, we're working with DEA right now to assess whether we can put restrictions on machinery or lab equipment that they use for that. So we're doing that kind of assessment, working both on my enforcement and my export administration side to see what we can do to crack down on that.
And if I could follow up, Mr. Crittenbrink, you said that direct engagement is not going very well. So what do we do in the face of that?
I'd say two things. One, we haven't given up in our direct engagement with the Chinese and using all tools and all leverage at our disposal to try to make progress directly with the Chinese. But I think, as I hope I've made clear here today, I think equally as important in our diplomacy writ large with China and on the fentanyl issue as well is to work together with our partners and friends who are also suffering from the diversion of these precursor chemicals, and together to engage the Chinese and put pressure on the Chinese to do the right thing, to control these chemicals in a way that prevents their diversion and illegal manufacture into fentanyl.
Well, I hope you'll call upon me and call upon all of us to be partners with you in making sure that we do everything possible, and we have to think outside the box, everything possible to reduce the trafficking of the manufacture of fentanyl, the trafficking of fentanyl. We now know that it is being laced into almost anything, and you don't have to be an addict to die of this. We heard testimony from a father whose 15-year-old son, Noah, recently died of fentanyl poisoning, thought he had purchased a Percocet pill. So you don't have to be an addict. It's not one thing or another. This is extraordinarily deadly in our communities. So anything we can do to partner with you, Congress can partner with you. Please call upon us.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for your leadership on this issue. Thank you.
And thank you, Ms. Dean. And I look forward to working with you and the ranking member on this very important issue. This is obviously a very bipartisan issue, and we'd like to get something done. And it touches thousands of lives. And I think 100,000 young people have died just this last year. So thank you for bringing that up. Chair now recognizes Ms. Radewagen.
Talofa, good morning. Thank you, Chairman McCall, Ranking Member Meeks, and thank you all for testifying today. Secretary Estevez, my questions are for you. Why is it appropriate for BIS to let U.S. technologies be exported to SMIC to advance the CCP's military modernization efforts?
Thank you for that question. SMIC is on the entity list. It's on the entity list with not a complete stop. We prevent the most advanced capabilities for making semiconductors from going to SMIC. So they can't make semiconductors below 14 nanometers.
Thank you. Following up on that, does BIS think it has visibility into where the chips produced by a CCP military company are going?
Most chips actually made in China are consumed in China. However, we are watching to see if they are moving chips to Russia in violation of our sanctions.
Is increased dependency on the PRC for these types of chips a national security issue? And how many PRC chips are you comfortable in having in DoD systems and U.S. critical infrastructure?
So, my export controls do part of the job here. The other part of the job is what we call in commerce, on play defense. The other part plays offense. I want to thank Congressman McCall for his support of the CHIPS Act being rolled out as we speak. Developing capability in the United States for the most advanced chips is critical. And for me personally, no chip in a DoD system should come from anywhere else but the United States.
If these are risks, why is BIS failing to act and mitigate this threat when it can easily use existing authorities?
I'm sorry, ma'am. I believe that we are stopping the most advanced chips from being made in China. Chips are a ubiquitous commodity at the legacy level.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Crow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, all of you, for your testimony today. My first question is about Afghanistan and China's efforts to capitalize on some of the mining opportunities there. In 2008, under the Karzai administration, the Afghans signed a 30-year contract with a Chinese joint venture company to extract high-grade copper from Mes Aynak. Can one of you give me an update on Chinese involvement with regard to that contract and their operations to try to get copper out of Afghanistan?
Representative Crow, thank you for your question. I would have to take that back and get back to you. I'm not familiar with the details of that deal. I know of it in general terms, but not in any detailed way. But I'd be happy to bring that back.
Yeah, that'd be great for the record. Thank you. Then the second is a broader question about Chinese infrastructure generally. I mean, I think sometimes view the Chinese as 10 feet tall, but they obviously have problems upon problems of their own. One of which is a pretty substantial blowback in certain areas on One Belt, One Road initiative efforts. I've spoken with a number of ambassadors and heads of state in Africa, and they have relayed to me that not only the predatory economics and high debt financing terms of a lot of these investments, but the infrastructure itself is not great and it is failing. Plus, a lot of it's built with Chinese labor, which is causing domestic turmoil within a lot of African countries as they see Chinese workers come in to build projects while their unemployment rate remains very, very high. Can you talk to me about some of the blowback that you're seeing with regard to their practices, particularly in Africa?
That first, why don't I take an initial stab, Congressman? I think you've outlined the problem well. We hear the same complaints from partners around the world. And what we have done is, one, to caution countries to be well aware of what they're getting into when they sign into one of these deals, whether it's the predatory finance that you mentioned, the fact that the quality of the infrastructure can be in question, and then through the use of PRC labor, oftentimes the economic benefits don't redound to that country, not to mention whether the project will be sustainable, including in environmental terms. But the other thing we try to do is offer alternatives, and I wonder if my colleagues would like to speak to that.
Thank you, Secretary. I completely agree with what you said, Congressman. I mean, our experience is that not only do projects by the PRC not often accrue to the economic benefit of countries, then they do burden countries with debt, but they also frequently involve environmental hazards, labor violations, poor quality, inappropriateness for local laws and conditions. This is why we've experienced strong demand for our product. Countries are looking for choice, and particularly the choice that we and our allies offer, which is high standard, which respects local laws and conditions, which is transparent, which is funding at the private level. This is the value proposition that the Development Finance Corporation is presenting around the world.
And with regard to the Development Finance Corporation, which I think is a phenomenal program, what barriers are you seeing in really scaling that and expediting it? And what would you need from Congress to, frankly, double down on that effort?
Thanks for that question. You know, the DFC is just over 3 years old, and I think we've made extraordinary progress in that time. But the BUILD Act contemplated a new tool set for DFC, importantly, one that includes the ability to make equity investments. Equity investments would allow us to take more risk, to be forward-leaning on the type of opportunities that we pursue in infrastructure and other companies around the world. We've made progress, but we have a limitation from a budgetary treatment of equity, limitation in our ability to realize the full promise of the equity tool. We look forward to working with this committee and others to remove those barriers and realize the full potential that the BUILD Act contemplated for DFC.
Thank you. And I just wanted to finish by, on this topic of China having their own problems, and just being very clear to China and to everyone listening that there's been a lot of talk about Ukraine emboldening China and strengthening China and weakening the West, given the attrition and the amount of weapons and equipment we're pouring into Ukraine. I actually think it's the opposite. I think United States, NATO, and the West are greatly formalizing and increasing the intelligence sharing and our analysis. We're strengthening our defense industrial base by essentially doing a real-time audit of some of our weaknesses and shortfalls, but we're fixing it and moving fast to fix it. We are increasing our partner training. We're learning about weapon systems and how ours perform vis-a-vis old Soviet systems. We're strengthening NATO and increasing investments and modernizing the NATO alliance. So this is, I think, an opportunity for us to show the strength of the West and how China is on the wrong side of history. Thank you. I yield back, Chairman.
Thank you. Chair now recognizes Mr. Huizenga.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. This is for those of you that were questioning today. This is my first term and first time being here at the Foreign Affairs Committee. I sit on the Financial Services Committee, and the reason why I mention that is because in my one of my past jobs was chairing what at the time was called the Monetary Policy and Trade Subcommittee, where I had the opportunity to look at our review process here in the United States when it came to sensitive technology. And I'm going to briefly touch on something here regarding a battery company, A123, that we reviewed at the time. But, you know, obviously COVID exposed a real issue with our supply chains and our dependence, whether it's chips, but certainly batteries, and coming from Michigan. I don't have any of the direct manufacturers, but I have all the suppliers, all the Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 automotive suppliers that are in my district, both past district and current district, including battery companies. But the A123 battery deal at the time was somewhat controversial. And I know I was in on some classified briefings on that, yet that was seemingly went through the process pretty quickly, and I felt like I was arguing against our own government, frankly, at times about why this would be could be problematic. And I'm curious, Undersecretary Estevez, do you mind just very quickly, is dependence on China for batteries a national security issue?
First of all, I want to note that the 123 deal went through CFIUS.
Yes,
back in
yep,
the day.
I'm aware, yeah, I'm aware, I am aware.
Probably not the best decision that CFIUS made, but that's hindsight.
Well, we're finding consensus there then.
Yeah, look, there's a whole bunch of technologies that we need to start doing investment on in the United States. We should not be reliant on China for batteries, for chips, for pharmaceutical precursors, for rare earths, and we need to, and my colleagues to my left are more in the engagement with allies
Yeah.
to build up those capabilities. I'm in the stopping from the Chinese to get stuff.
Yeah.
But we certainly need to look at our supply chains better.
Sure, and we had a review of the CFIUS process, and Representative Barr, who's also on this committee, who followed me as the chair of MPT, was a crucial part of that. I do want to move on here in my last 2 minutes for Mr. Crittenbrink. Has the State Department refused to approve or requested the delay of sanctions to hold the PRC accountable for human rights violations against the Uyghurs?
Congressman, what I would say is, as I indicated earlier, human rights remain central to our foreign policy.
I understand that,
We've
but
taken a range of
has there been a
steps.
request for a delay?
We've taken a range of steps to impose costs on those who are carrying out genocide in Xinjiang, including sanctioning under Global Magnitsky 12 officials and another 7 who have been placed under visa
right.
restrictions.
I've got a minute and a half here. Let's get very specific. Has Deputy Secretary Sherman refused to approve or requested any delay in implementation of congressionally mandated the Uyghur Human Rights Policy or IRPA sanctions?
What I would say, sir, is we continue to take a number of steps, and we will take a number of steps to hold accountable those in China.
That's
who
a
are-
yes or no kind of question, though.
Congressman, I will just reiterate what I've said. We are committed to.
Well, either you know or you don't know.
Congressman, we're committed to taking steps. I'm happy to take that back and come back to you.
Please do. Yeah, that is the purpose of this. And have you personally supported any delay in IRPA?
I support making sure that we take steps to ensure that we hold to account those in China who are carrying out.
I understand that, but respectfully, that's not my question, both for Mr. Sherman or for yourself. Have you felt it was in the best interest for a delay?
I think it's in America's national interest to continue to carry out our steps to hold account those people.
And
who
are you doing
carrying out-
everything that you can do to push forward on those steps and implementing those steps as been congressionally mandated? In a bipartisan banner, I might add.
Yes, sir. I'm confident that all of my colleagues and all of my leadership are committed to making sure that we hold to account those in China.
And
who
moving
continue
ahead in
to
a
carry-
timely fashion.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we're going to hold you to that.
We are committed, again, to holding to account those who are carrying out genocide in Xinjiang, in China.
Okay, we expect that action to continue. And with that, Mr. Chairman, my time has expired. I yield back.
Thank you.